What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and today I have my Denver Broncos season preview for y'all, so let's hop into it. And last year they finished with a 5-12 record. They missed the playoffs. They finished last in the AFC West in what was ultimately a very disappointing season. They went out, they traded for Russell Wilson, and it just didn't pan out. He didn't play well. The team really didn't play well. They had injuries. It was a pretty disastrous season, if you ask me, and pretty much anybody, even I think Broncos fans will admit that it was just a horrible year last year. So some notable free agents the Broncos brought in to help improve the team: defensive end Zach Allen, running back Samaje Perine. They did lose a couple of the running backs that I will get into later. Offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey was a big one to help bolster that offensive line and protect Russell Wilson. Cornerback Tremon Smith, offensive guard Ben Powers, defensive end Frank Clark, kicker Brett Maher, and quarterback Jarrett Stidham to back up Russell Wilson. So the Broncos did a good job of addressing the offensive line needs, not only through their free agent signings, but also some of the guys that they re-signed. They re-signed offensive tackle Quinn Bailey, offensive tackle Cam Fleming. So just another couple of guys to solidify that offensive line and keep Russell Wilson upright. They also brought back safety Kareem Jackson, linebacker Alex Singleton, a couple of solid players on that defense. They also made a trade for tight end Adam Troutman. I don't know how big of an impact he will have on this team. I believe when I looked at the depth chart, he is slotted in at their tight end one. So hopefully he could be a reliable tight end for Russell Wilson this upcoming year. So the Broncos did a good job of bringing in guys to help this team. They did lose a couple running backs in Chase Edmonds and Latavius Murray. The biggest loss they had was defensive tackle Draymond Jones. They also cut kicker Brian McManus, but they addressed with getting Brett Maher, so that kind of cancels out. They also lost wide receiver KJ Hamler. I know it was kind of like an injury thing, but I think he is a pretty underrated receiver in this league. They also lost center Graham Glasgow. So they did lose a decent chunk of veterans, but I think they did a decent job at bringing in guys to fill those roles that were open. But I think the biggest move the Broncos made this offseason was bringing in head coach Sean Payton, a new offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi, and a new defensive coordinator in Vance Joseph. He's coming back to Denver. He was with them. He was their head coach before, so a familiar face in Joseph. So having a new coaching staff could be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't think it'll be a terrible thing to have a new coaching staff come in. If this was a super young team, I don't know how I would feel about it. I feel like there would definitely be a learning curve. But with a lot of the veteran guys, with Russell Wilson at QB, I think it won't be that big of a deal that they have a completely new coaching staff. But anyway, moving on to their draft class, they didn't have a first round pick because they made the Russell Wilson trade last year. But with their first pick in the draft, they got wide receiver Marvin Mims, a decent wide receiver that I think could be a reliable weapon for Russell Wilson. They brought in linebacker Drew Sanders, cornerback Riley Moss, safety J.L. Skinner, and center Alex Forsyth. So once again, kind of addressing that offensive line later in the draft, but still a solid draft class for not having a lot of picks. But anyway, now that we got all their transactions and players that they brought in and left, let's move over to my record prediction for the Denver Broncos. All right, now, so in week one, they have the Las Vegas Raiders, and this is an interesting matchup because just like the Broncos this year, I have no idea how good the Raiders are going to be. These are two teams that definitely disappointed last year, and this year, coming into it, it's a blank slate. Anything is possible. So really, anything can happen. But with this game being at home, I do think the Broncos get the benefit of the doubt, so I will give them the win in week one against the Raiders, but I do think they split the season series with them, so I will change their week 18 matchup down here to a loss for the team. So in week two, they have the Washington Commanders, and this is another game that if Washington comes out of the gate kind of stumbling and Denver comes out on fire, Sean Payton has that offense clicking under Russell Wilson, the Broncos can be a very dangerous team. So I think Denver, with this being an early game, I think gets the benefit of the doubt here and beats the Commanders in week two. But in week three, when they go on the road to face the Miami Dolphins, I think the Dolphins will be very good this year. So I think this will be an L for the Broncos. But then they have the Chicago Bears. And the Bears, I don't want to say are like super overhyped this year. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of stuff that Justin Fields is going to be like a top 10 quarterback, and I just don't feel that way. I don't think Ohio State really has good quarterbacks. Like, I don't think their talent translates well to the league. So I'm not super high on the Bears. I don't know how you feel about that. Let me know down below. But I'm just not super high on the Bears. I think the Broncos have the quarterback advantage in Russell Wilson, and I think Denver just has a better overall team than the Bears. So I think Denver also gets the win right here. Then in week 5, they have the New York Jets, and the Jets are my pick to be this year's Denver Broncos. Like how the Broncos disappointed last year, I feel the Jets could very well disappoint this year. So, depending on how the Jets do, this game could go either way. If Aaron Rodgers is playing great, I don't see the Broncos winning this, but if he's playing bad, then I definitely could see the Broncos winning it. But I'm gonna just say the Jets are going to be a more improved team than the Broncos, so I'll give the Broncos the loss here, as well as in Week 6 to the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think I really have to go too in depth of why I think the Chiefs are going to beat the Broncos. But then they got the Green Bay Packers, another team that I am pretty low on this year, and I do think Denver can get the win here. Then they play the Chiefs again, so playing the Chiefs twice in 3 weeks, that's just tough, and I think the Chiefs get the better of them twice. So at their week 9 bye, they're sitting at a 4-4 record, so 500 ball. That's not terrible. But then coming out of their bye week, they got a pretty tough stretch. They got the Bills, which I think will be a loss. Then they got the Vikings, which I also think will be a loss. And I think just from losing the previous 2 games, they're kind of just in a down stretch. And I think they slip up and lose to Cleveland as well. But then the following week, they bounce back with a win over the Texans, and then they have their first of 2 meetings with the Chargers. And I do think the Chargers are just a better team than the Broncos, and I feel like they lose both of them. So another disappointing year in the division. They only win 1 game against the Raiders, but they lose all their other divisional games. So it is a tough break for them. And then I also feel like they lose the following week to Detroit. I do have high hopes for Detroit. Go check that video out. And then on Christmas Eve, they play the New England Patriots, who I think they're going to finish last in the AFC East. So, but I do think the Broncos can beat them. And then we already talked about them losing to the Chargers and the Raiders earlier. So that brings their record to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6-11 as their record, which is a little bit better than they did last year. I I just don't know with this Broncos team. I don't know if they're going to take giant strides or if they're just going to kind of stay around how they played last year. I just don't know about this Denver Broncos team. Like they have the potential to be really good, but they haven't proved anything. So I'm real hesitant to give them like a 10-win season or better. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Broncos. This was one of the more tricky ones to do just because like they have the potential, but they have showed diddly squat on the field. So yeah, just let me know what you guys think. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you with another season preview. God bless.